The real architects of medieval empires left no names in the history books. This is the story of 24 silent geniuses who reshaped civilizations from the shadows. By the end of this journey, you will see history itself in a new light, recognizing the unseen forces that built our world. We will uncover how a single unknown engineer could design an impregnable fortress, and why a mysterious figure who turned deserts into farmland chose to vanish without credit. How much of history is shaped by people we will never know? A moonless night wraps around a besieged city, its fate resting on a single set of calculations. The first of our silent architects was a master of siegecraft, a ghost in the records whose genius lay not in attack, but in an almost supernatural form of defense. Historical fragments from monastic chronicles speak of a figure who moved between rival kingdoms, offering his services without ever pledging loyalty to a crown. He was a weapon unto himself, and his weapon of choice was the wall itself. He designed layered defensive systems, walls within walls, where each surface was built at a precise angle to deflect incoming boulders and shatter siege ladders on impact. It was architecture as a form of martial art. His most fearsome creation, however, was kept secret until the moment of greatest desperation, the hidden counterweight trebuchet. Unlike the massive, slow-moving engines of the attackers, his were built in concealed positions, often behind existing fortifications. They could be assembled quickly and unleashed a devastating payload on besieging forces who believed they were safely out of range. This innovation did more than just protect a city. It transformed the very nature of a siege. A conflict that might have ended in weeks could stretch for months, forcing an invading army to exhaust its supplies, its money, and its morale against an invisible opponent. So why would such a brilliant mind choose to remain nameless? His anonymity was his ultimate advantage. By having no public allegiance, he could be hired by any kingdom, his knowledge flowing across borders while his identity remained a shadow. He was not a traitor to any one lord, but a free agent of survival, and his secrecy made him more effective than any sworn knight. While the siege master manipulated stone and force, another kind of architect was mastering a far more elusive element. In a kingdom choked by dust, a stranger would appear at the height of the dry season, a man who spoke the language of water. This second architect, known only as the Water Wizard, did not build walls to keep people out, but designed channels to let life in. His genius was hydrological, a profound understanding of how water moved, hid, and could be coaxed from the earth itself. Arab scholars of the era recorded his works with a tone of awe, describing methods so advanced they blurred the line between engineering and pure magic. He designed subterranean aqueducts that snaked for miles underground, invisible to any passing army, protecting the precious flow from evaporation and sabotage. His networks were not just ditches, but complex systems with precise, gentle gradients that used gravity's constant pull to guide water across vast distances without a single pump. He engineered hidden filtration chambers layered with sand, charcoal, and gravel, creating clean drinking water centuries before the concept of public sanitation existed. His most ingenious act was learning to harvest water from the very air, designing vast fields of stone and gravel that collected the morning dew, channeling every single droplet into his underground labyrinths. He did not just find water, he convinced it to follow him. The sudden and unexplained prosperity of the Catalan hinterlands in the 13th century stands as a silent monument to his work. Barren landscapes erupted into fertile farmlands, supporting population booms that fueled entire regional economies. How could one person's understanding of hydrology become more valuable than an army's strength? An army can conquer a city, but it cannot command the rain. This architect's power lay in mastering nature's own invisible forces, turning scarcity into abundance and securing a kingdom's future not with a sword but with a secret spring. His legacy was a simple, profound truth that the most powerful siege weapon of all is a well-fed, thriving population. Security in a medieval castle did not always mean building higher walls or thicker gates. It could also mean designing a perfect lie. While the water wizard mastered nature's flow and the siege master manipulated force, our third silent architect understood a more human weakness, the power of confusion. He was the Castle Cryptographer, a designer whose blueprints were written in riddles and whose greatest strength was architectural deception. Contemporary accounts describe a reclusive figure, a man who worked only under the cover of darkness and communicated with his builders through coded instructions carved into wooden tokens. His castles were puzzles made of stone, filled with secrets meant not just to hide people, but to shatter an invader's confidence. He engineered rotating sections of staircases that could be locked to trap attackers on a dead-end landing. He built false walls that appeared to be the end of a corridor, but when pushed, swung open to reveal a sheer drop into a concealed oubliette, a hidden dungeon. His most brilliant escape routes did not simply lead to a nearby forest. They were underground tunnels, often beginning in something as innocuous as a chapel pew or a hearth, that snaked for miles before emerging in a safe, distant village. The survival of the Dauphin's entire court during the baronial revolt stands as direct proof of his work. While rebel forces stormed the main gates, the nobility simply vanished from their chambers, reappearing safely miles away, leaving the conquering army to occupy an empty shell. What does this tell us about the relationship between architectural trickery and political survival? A king can command 10,000 soldiers, but if he cannot be found, he cannot be captured. This architect's genius was psychological. He built mazes that protected power not through brute strength, but by making an enemy question the very reality of the fortress around them. Sometimes the most impenetrable defense is a well-placed secret that turns certainty into doubt. A kingdom's true strength can be measured not just in its walls, but in the weight of its coins. While the Castle Cryptographer built labyrinths of stone, a fourth architect was designing a far more subtle kind of fortress, one made of trust and precious metal. He was the Monetary Maverick, a ghost in the ledgers who waged a secret war against economic chaos. In an age where rival kingdoms and counterfeiters constantly debased currency, melting down coins and mixing in cheaper metals to fund their wars, he introduced a revolutionary minting technique that restored faith in money itself. Fragmented mint masters' diaries from the period speak of an anonymous consultant who arrived without fanfare, teaching them alloy composition secrets that produced a unique ring when struck, a clear bell tone that cheap imitations could never replicate. He introduced edge marking, intricate patterns stamped along the rim of each coin, a detail almost impossible to forge with the crude tools of the time. His systems extended beyond the mint, providing merchants with specially calibrated verification scales that could detect a coin's precise weight to the smallest grain. His most brilliant security feature, however, was a hidden mark, a tiny symbol only visible when the coin was held at a specific angle to the light. This was not just a technical innovation, it was a psychological masterstroke. It created a network of trust where any merchant or peasant could, with a quick glance, verify the authenticity of their payment. The sudden and powerful economic revival of the Lombard League cities, which went from financial disarray to regional economic dominance in a single generation, stands as direct proof of his clandestine work. So why would a person with the power to shape entire economies choose to remain a shadow? His influence depended entirely on his anonymity. A known face could be coerced, his secrets stolen or reversed. By being a ghost, his systems became untouchable, operating as an invisible bedrock of stability. His legacy teaches us that the most resilient power is often the kind that no one knows is there, quietly ensuring that every transaction, from a king's ransom to a loaf of bread, is built on a foundation of unshakable certainty. A single bridge can rewrite the geography of an entire region. Our fifth silent architect, a figure travelers called the Span Sorcerer, did exactly that, using stone and mortar to perform what seemed like miracles of connection. Where raging rivers had long divided kingdoms and stifled trade, he built structures that appeared to float, their elegant arches defying the torrents below. His genius lay in a revolutionary understanding of balance and force, pioneering cantilever designs that extended the bridge's reach by using its own weight as a counterweight, like a stone arm locked in a perpetual, powerful grip. He engineered foundation caissons, massive watertight chambers sunk into riverbeds, allowing his workers to build stable piers on solid ground far below the shifting silt and destructive currents. These were not just bridges, they were fortresses against nature's fury, designed with hidden internal drainage channels that siphoned off floodwaters and cleverly disguised expansion joints that allowed the entire structure to flex and breathe with the seasons without cracking. The famous trade route between Burgundy and Flanders, once a patchwork of dangerous fords and unreliable ferries, suddenly became a direct, reliable artery for commerce, all thanks to his previously unattributed river crossings. How does connecting people physically also bind them economically and culturally? A bridge does more than carry carts, it carries ideas, customs, and currency. It turns isolated towns into networked communities and local markets into international hubs. This architect's work was a silent language of unity, proving that the most enduring power does not always lie in division and defense, but sometimes in the simple, profound act of building a way across. High on a wind-swept mountain peak, a community of monks thrived in a place where most would struggle to survive. This was the work of our sixth silent architect, a figure known only as the Monastic Planner. While the Span Sorcerer connected kingdoms with bridges, this architect built entire worlds behind monastery walls, designing self-sufficient communities that harmonized spiritual pursuit with earthly necessity. Contemporary manuscripts describe a wandering brother, a man who never stayed long in one place, but who left behind meticulously detailed architectural plans that transformed remote religious outposts into bastions of learning, health, and security. His genius was one of integration, seeing the entire complex as a single, living organism. He did not just design a chapel, he designed how light would fall on a scribe's desk. He did not just plan a garden, he planned how its waste would nourish the next season's crops. His layouts included ingenious reflective light channels, systems of polished metal, and strategically placed windows that captured and directed sunlight deep into the scriptoriums, allowing scribes to work longer hours without straining their eyes on flickering candlelight. For the chapels, he engineered acoustic enhancements, shaping vaulted ceilings and alcoves to carry a single spoken prayer to every corner of the room, making the divine word feel intimately present for every monk. Perhaps his most life-saving innovation was a sophisticated waste management system that used gravity-fed water channels from mountain streams to flush latrines, carrying waste safely away from living quarters and into sealed composting pits that later fertilized the gardens. This single innovation prevented the outbreaks of disease that so often decimated closed communities. The unprecedented scholarly output of the Alpine abbeys during the 12th century, producing countless illuminated manuscripts and theological works, was not merely a spiritual triumph. It was a direct result of this architect's ergonomic and hygienic designs. Monks who were healthy, who had light to see, and who lived in a clean, orderly environment could dedicate their full energy to intellectual and spiritual labor. What can we learn about community design from someone who understood both the soul's yearning and the body's needs? The monastic planner's legacy reveals that the most enduring structures are those that serve the whole human being. True architecture does not force a choice between practicality and transcendence. It weaves them together into a single, seamless fabric, proving that a society's greatest achievements are built on a foundation of quiet, thoughtful care for the most fundamental aspects of life. A coastline lashed by winter storms seemed an impossible place for a port, yet that is precisely where the seventh architect chose to work. Known only as the Port Phantom, this maritime genius saw not obstacles in the crashing waves, but patterns waiting to be understood. Sailors' legends passed down for generations speak of a figure who could read the ocean's rhythms like a familiar map, transforming treacherous, storm-battered shores into safe, all-weather harbors through designs that appeared almost overnight. His most foundational innovation was the submerged breakwater, a massive barrier of stone built just below the water's surface. Unlike a solid wall that would be shattered by a wave's direct force, his design was a precisely calculated maze. It broke up the massive, unified energy of a wave into countless smaller, harmless currents, dissipating its power before it ever reached the docks. He complemented this with revolutionary tidal gate systems, wooden structures that used the moon's own gravitational pull to regulate water flow, creating calm, predictable basins where ships could load and unload regardless of the weather. His floating docks, which rose and fell with the tide, meant that a vessel could be secured at any hour, eliminating the dangerous and time-consuming wait for high water. The sudden and unexplained maritime dominance of certain Italian city-states, which rose from minor coastal towns to naval superpowers in a single generation, can be directly traced to these hidden harbor enhancements. So how does controlling access to the sea translate into absolute power? A secure port is more than a shelter for ships. It is the heart of an empire's pulse. It is where wealth from across the known world flows in, and where military expeditions launch with unwavering certainty. The Port Phantom did not just calm the waters, he built the very gateways through which economic and military destiny flowed, proving that the most fluid and unpredictable force of nature could be guided by a silent, unseen hand. A withered field of dust and despair could be transformed into a sea of golden grain within a single season. This was the power of the eighth silent architect, a figure remembered only in peasant folklore as the Soil Shaman. While the Port Phantom mastered the sea, this architect worked a quieter miracle on the land itself, an agricultural engineer whose understanding of the earth was so profound it bordered on alchemy. He moved through the countryside like a rumor, a stranger who would arrive in a struggling village, observe the failing fields, and then offer knowledge that seemed to fall from the heavens. His genius was systematic, introducing a revolutionary three-field crop rotation that eliminated the need for letting land lie completely fallow. Instead of exhausting the soil by planting the same crop year after year, he taught farmers to cycle between grains that drained nutrients, legumes that replenished them, and root vegetables that broke up compacted earth. This single change effectively doubled the amount of food a given plot could produce, but his methods went far deeper. He was a master of soil enrichment, creating complex fertilizers from composted waste, crushed bone, and wood ash, recipes he tailored to the specific mineral deficiencies of a region. He taught the art of reading land signs, how the types of weeds that grew could indicate the soil's acidity, or how the color of the earth could reveal its iron content. His most visually stunning innovation was the widespread implementation of terracing on previously unusable hillsides. He designed these stepped fields with intricate underground water retention systems, layers of gravel and sand that captured rainfall and slowly released it to the crops, preventing both drought and erosion. He even provided companion planting guides, showing how growing certain herbs alongside vegetables could repel pests naturally, and how strategic patches of wildflowers could attract the very insects that would protect the harvest. The unprecedented population explosion in the Rhine Valley during the High Middle Ages, a demographic boom that fueled the growth of entire new cities, was not an accident of history. It was directly supported by the agricultural surplus his clandestine teachings made possible. So why would a person possessing the knowledge to prevent famines and feed millions choose to remain forever anonymous? His secrecy was his ultimate tool for survival and impact. In an era where food was power, a known face would have been a target. A king or a warlord would not have shared this knowledge with peasants. They would have hoarded it, weaponizing control over the food supply to consolidate their own authority. By working in the shadows, the Soil Shaman ensured his life-saving techniques spread like roots through the soil, reaching the people who needed them most, not just the rulers who would abuse them. His legacy is a testament to a radical idea that true power is not always about controlling a kingdom's granaries, but about empowering every single farmer to fill them. Deep within the clattering heart of a medieval workshop, a quiet revolution was spinning itself into existence. Our ninth silent architect, the Loom-Luminary, did not build with stone or earth, but with thread, transforming the very fabric of society. Fragmented guild records from the period whisper of a mysterious technician, a figure who moved between weaving towns, sharing designs that seemed to come from the future. His primary gift was the horizontal treadle loom, a machine that freed a weaver's hands entirely for the shuttle by using foot pedals to control the alternating warp threads. This single invention doubled the speed of cloth production, but his genius did not stop there. He reimagined the spinning wheel itself, adding a foot-operated crank and a refined flyer mechanism that twisted the fiber into yarn and wound it onto a spindle in one seamless, continuous motion. This quadrupled the output of a single spinner, shattering the ancient bottleneck between raw wool and finished cloth. His innovations extended to the very quality of the thread, with precise tension control systems ensuring every strand was perfectly consistent, strong enough for the faster, more powerful looms. And when the cloth was woven, his knowledge of alchemy transformed it. He introduced natural dye fixation techniques, using common mordants like alum to bind plant-based colors to the fibers, creating vibrant reds, deep blues, and rich yellows that would not fade after a single wash. This created a new class of luxury goods that common people could actually afford. The sudden, explosive textile boom in Flemish cities like Ghent and Bruges, which began to dominate European markets and successfully challenge the long-held monopoly of Eastern silk and tapestry imports, was not a historical accident. It was woven on the hidden looms he designed. So how does improving something as simple as cloth ripple through an entire civilization? It begins with the weaver who can now support a family. It flows to the merchant whose ships carry more valuable cargo. It empowers a city which grows wealthy enough to demand political freedoms from its feudal lords. It even fuels exploration, as sails and ropes are produced in unprecedented quantities. The Loom-Luminary proved that the threads of commerce, culture, and power are all spun on the same hidden spindle, and that the most profound changes often begin with a single, perfectly twisted strand. A cathedral without stained glass is a body without a soul. This 10th silent architect, known only as the Glazier Ghost, was the master who breathed that soul into stone, a chemist and artist who transformed lead and sand into visions of divine light. Fragmented church accounts from the period speak of a wanderer, a man who appeared at building sites not to claim credit, but to share knowledge, teaching local craftsmen chemical recipes and assembly techniques that seemed to defy the very limitations of their materials. His genius was both aesthetic and profoundly scientific. He developed new glass formulas, achieving colors of previously unimaginable intensity. He discovered that adding cobalt to the molten mixture produced a deep celestial blue, while gold chloride, carefully ground and fused, yielded a brilliant ruby red that glowed like a holy ember when the sun shone through. But his art was not merely for beauty, it was a feat of engineering. He pioneered structural glass, creating panels strong enough to bear their own weight in vast window spans without sagging or cracking over centuries. He formulated glass that could withstand extreme temperature shifts, preventing the magnificent rose windows of northern France from shattering under the summer sun or winter frost. His understanding of optics even extended to crafting early lenses for scientific instruments, laying a hidden foundation for future discovery. These spectacular windows, which still draw gasps of wonder today, are his true signature. So why would an artist capable of such breathtaking beauty vanish from the records? For the Glazier Ghost, the art was never about the hand that made it, but the eyes that beheld it. His anonymity was an act of devotion, a conscious choice to erase himself so that the faithful looking up at those radiant scenes would see only the face of the divine, not the shadow of the craftsman. His legacy is a silent testament to the idea that the highest form of creation is one that points beyond itself, using genius not to build a name, but to illuminate a path toward something greater. The glow of a blacksmith's forge held more than just heat, it contained the secret to reshaping empires. Our 11th silent architect, known only as the Forge Phantom, was a master of this hidden alchemy, a metallurgical engineer who could turn brittle iron into resilient steel through techniques that baffled his contemporaries. Armorers' manuscripts from the period describe a spectral figure, a man who visited workshops under the cover of darkness, leaving behind knowledge of temperature control and carbon content that transformed the very nature of metalwork. His genius was not in a single invention, but in a complete system of understanding. He pioneered smelting processes that removed more impurities from the ore, creating a purer, more consistent base metal. His tempering techniques were a closely guarded ritual, involving heating the steel to a precise, cherry red glow before quenching it in a secret bath of oil and water. This process, a delicate dance between extreme heat and rapid cooling, created a sword blade that was flexible enough to bend without snapping, yet hard enough to hold a razor-sharp edge through the chaos of battle. For the fields, he developed corrosion-resistant alloys for plowshares and scythes, tools that lasted for generations instead of a single season, dramatically increasing a farmer's productivity. The legendary, almost mythical quality of Toledo steel, a blade so superior it could split a falling silk scarf and still shatter an opponent's sword, finds its true origin in his uncredited innovations. So how does the quiet mastery of material science tilt the scales of history? A kingdom armed with these superior weapons gains an immediate and decisive advantage on the battlefield, turning its soldiers into an unstoppable force. But the impact runs far deeper than warfare. With more durable and efficient agricultural tools, the same amount of land can be farmed by fewer people, freeing up labor for crafts, trade, and conquest. The economic and military power of an empire was not just planned in war rooms, it was literally forged in these hidden fires by a ghost whose name was lost to the smoke, but whose legacy was stamped into every resilient blade and every enduring plowshare. A treacherous mountain path was more than just a dangerous journey. It was a wall that sealed off entire communities from the flow of civilization. Our 12th silent architect, the Pathfinder, dedicated his life to dismantling such walls, not with demolition, but with careful, almost invisible design. Merchant caravan logs from the Alpine passes speak of a solitary figure who would appear at the most perilous junctions, a man who carried no obvious tools but whose advice could save 100 wagons from destruction. His genius was not in grand, monumental structures, but in a deep, intuitive understanding of the land itself. He would study a mountainside for days, reading the lay of the stone and the flow of the water, before suggesting a new path that seemed to coax safety from the very cliffs. His methods were subtle yet profound. For unstable slopes, he engineered hidden reinforcements, weaving networks of willow and stone deep within the earth to anchor the ground without a single visible buttress. He designed strategic switchbacks that coiled up a mountain face with a gentle, consistent gradient, allowing heavily laden ox carts to ascend where before only a lone rider could pass. His most enduring innovation, however, was his mastery of water. He carved natural diversion channels and subsurface drains alongside his roads, invisible systems that silently whisked away meltwater and rain, preventing the erosion that had swallowed so many earlier paths. The dramatic and rapid expansion of the Hanseatic League's overland trade network into previously inaccessible regions stands as a direct, if uncredited, monument to his work. Suddenly, goods from the Baltic could reach the markets of Italy with a speed and reliability that seemed miraculous. So how do these hidden pathways become the true arteries of an empire? A road does not merely carry silk and spices, it carries news, it carries soldiers, and most importantly, it carries influence. The flow of commerce binds distant provinces to a central authority, turning a collection of isolated towns into a unified, powerful state. The Pathfinder understood that the most effective way to control a kingdom was not always to fortify its borders, but to quietly, masterfully connect its heart to its farthest reaches. His legacy is etched not in stone plaques, but in the very routes we still travel today, a reminder that the most powerful connections are often the ones we never see being made. A city gripped by plague is a terrifying sight, but a city that remains untouched is a miracle. While other urban centers were decimated by the Black Death, a handful of towns across Europe stood as inexplicable islands of health, their secret hidden not in medicine but in stone and water. This 13th silent architect was the Cleanliness Cultivator, a public health engineer whose work was a silent war against invisible enemies. Fragmented municipal records from Swiss cantons mention an anonymous consultant who arrived with radical ideas, advocating for systems so advanced they seemed absurd to his contemporaries. He designed covered sewer networks, intricate underground channels of brick and mortar that carried waste away from populated streets and directly into sealed, remote containment pits. This single innovation prevented the rats and fleas that carried the plague from ever coming into contact with the population. His genius extended to water purification, designing gravity-fed aqueducts that brought fresh spring water from the mountains into public cisterns, with built-in sand and charcoal filtration chambers that removed contaminants long before the science of germs was understood. He even redesigned the very air people breathed, engineering ventilation systems in public buildings and bathhouses that used the natural principle of thermal uplift. Hot, stagnant, pathogen-filled air would rise and escape through cleverly designed upper vents, while cooler, fresh air was drawn in from below, creating a constant cleansing circulation. The famously low mortality rates in towns like St. Gallen during the worst pandemics were not a matter of divine favor. but a direct result of this uncredited infrastructure. So why would a savior of thousands choose to vanish from history? His anonymity was the ultimate guarantee of his system's success. Public trust is a fragile thing. If people saw the man behind the clean water and the hidden sewers, they might have questioned the magic, or worse, a rival lord might have kidnapped him to gain the same advantage. By being a ghost, his life-saving designs became as natural and unquestioned as the mountains themselves. The most effective public health system is the one that works so perfectly, no one ever has to wonder who built it. A single note, perfectly pitched, can fill a hollow stone chamber with the presence of the divine. This 14th silent architect was an acoustic alchemist, a musical mathematician who understood that sound was a force to be sculpted, not just heard. Choir master diaries from the great cathedral building campaigns mention a quiet visitor, a man who would walk the empty naves, clapping his hands and listening intently to the echoes. He was not measuring with rulers, but with his ears, calculating the invisible geometry of sound waves. His genius lay in transforming mediocre acoustics into sublime spiritual experiences through a series of hidden architectural interventions. He designed resonance chambers, empty spaces deliberately built into the walls and foundations. These cavities were not structural mistakes, they were tuned instruments, vibrating in sympathy with specific musical notes from the choir, amplifying them and giving the human voice an unearthly richness and sustain. He pioneered sound diffusion by shaping the very surfaces of the cathedral interior. He specified rough-hewn stone for certain walls to scatter the sound waves gently, preventing harsh echoes while insisting on smooth, polished marble for other surfaces to project the music clearly across vast distances. His most subtle art was in proportion. He provided builders with specific ratios for the height, width, and length of chapels, ensuring that the architecture itself harmonized with the musical scale, creating a space where sacred chants resonated with a perfect celestial clarity. The unparalleled musical tradition of certain German cathedrals, where compositions by masters like Heinrich Schütz seem to unlock a deeper, more emotional power, finds its true origin in these undocumented acoustic designs. So how does shaping the very space in which we hear music influence our spiritual and cultural experience? The architecture of hearing reveals a hidden dimension of human perception. When music is not merely played but is awakened by the room itself, it ceases to be a performance and becomes an environment, a sanctuary for the soul. This architect proved that true beauty is not just seen, but felt in the resonance of a perfectly placed stone, a hidden chamber that sings along with every hymn, transforming faith from an idea into an experience that vibrates in the very bones of the believer. A single intercepted message could unravel an alliance and plunge a kingdom into war. In the hushed corridors of power, our 15th silent architect waged a secret war not with weapons but with ink and intellect. He was the Cryptographic Clerk, a master of secrets whose true weapon was an unbreakable code. Diplomatic correspondence from the era makes fleeting, awestruck references to an anonymous cipher master, a man who appeared only to teach royal scribes methods of protection so advanced they seemed like sorcery. His genius was systematic, building layers of deception around every critical word. He moved beyond simple substitution ciphers, where one letter merely replaces another, and pioneered complex polyalphabetic systems. In these, the same letter in the original message would be represented by different letters in the coded text, depending on its position, creating a shifting, unpredictable pattern that defied all traditional code-breaking methods. His most revolutionary concept was the one-time pad, a system where a random key, used only once and then destroyed, could produce a cipher that was mathematically impossible to crack without that exact key. But his art was not always about complex mathematics. He was a master of steganography, the art of hiding a message's very existence. He taught agents to write secret dispatches in invisible inks made from lemon juice or milk, messages that would only appear when heated over a candle flame. He devised ways to conceal vital intelligence within the seemingly innocent text of a merchant's invoice or a noblewoman's personal letter, where the true meaning was embedded in the first letter of every line or in a pre-arranged pattern of punctuation. He even designed early mechanical cipher devices, complex disks with rotating rings of letters that predated the famous Alberti disk by generations, allowing a user to quickly encode and decode messages with a shared setting. The legendary security of the Venetian intelligence network, which secured crucial treaties and outmaneuvered rivals for decades, relied entirely on his uncredited cryptographic systems. So why does the ultimate security of information demand the absolute anonymity of its architect? The answer is as elegant as it is absolute. A known codemaker is a single point of failure, a vulnerability that can be captured, bribed, or coerced into revealing his methods. But a ghost, a whisper in the records, creates a system that is untouchable. His ciphers could protect empires because he, himself, was the greatest secret of all, a living embodiment of the principle that to protect a kingdom's whispers, the protector must himself remain utterly silent. High in a remote tower, a lone figure charted the silent dance of the cosmos, translating starlight into survival. This 16th silent architect, the Astronomical Observer, was a master of celestial mechanics, an engineer whose tools were not chisels and mortar, but calibrated brass and precise mathematics. Fragmented monastery chronicles speak of a wanderer they called the Star Seeker, a man who appeared at isolated coastal monasteries and royal outposts, installing devices of such accuracy they seemed gifted by the heavens themselves. His genius was one of application. He did not just build instruments, he built systems of knowledge. He designed and calibrated monumental sundials that could tell the time to within a minute, and he engraved meridian lines on chapel floors, where a single sunbeam would fall at the precise moment of solar noon, synchronizing entire communities to a single, reliable clock. He refined the astrolabe, creating portable versions with intricate star maps that allowed sailors to determine their latitude on the open sea, far from any familiar coastline. His most revolutionary contribution, hinted at in encrypted notes, was an early observational telescope, a tube of carefully ground lenses that revealed the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus, celestial data that would later prove the sun-centered model of the solar system. But his work was not confined to exploration. He produced detailed agricultural calendars based on stellar movements, predicting the optimal dates for planting and harvest with a precision that maximized yields and secured food supplies for entire regions. The legendary success of trans-Mediterranean trade routes, where ships could navigate with newfound confidence, and the agricultural prosperity of kingdoms like Navarre, which enjoyed decades of predictable bounty, were direct results of his uncredited charts and tables. So how does reading the stars grant power over the earth? The answer lies in the transformation of uncertainty into order. A captain who knows his position can brave the open ocean, discovering new lands and trade winds. A farmer who trusts the calendar can plant his fields without fear of an early frost. This architect's silent work wove a thread of celestial certainty through the fabric of daily life, proving that the most distant lights in the sky could guide the most practical steps on the ground, connecting the fate of empires to the timeless rhythms of the universe. A silent revolution was unfolding not on battlefields or in royal courts, but within the hushed halls of libraries. This 17th architect, the Scriptorium Strategist, understood that knowledge was only as powerful as one's ability to find it. He was an information specialist whose true genius lay not in writing books, but in building the very systems that allowed ideas to connect and flourish. Scattered university records from Paris and Bologna speak of a mysterious consultant who arrived without title or retinue, a man who saw the chaotic piles of manuscripts and scrolls not as a problem, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. His first innovation was architectural, redesigning the library layout itself. He moved away from the traditional practice of storing books in heavy, locked chests. Instead, he designed specialized reading rooms with long, angled desks and shelves built into the walls, allowing multiple scholars to consult different texts simultaneously. He introduced the first subject-based classification system, organizing works not just by the date they were acquired or the size of their binding, but by their core topic, grouping all texts on law together, all on medicine, and all on philosophy. This simple yet profound shift meant a student of theology did not have to waste months hunting for a relevant commentary. It was waiting for him in a predictable, logical place. His indexing methods were a form of early search engine, creating detailed lists that cross-referenced topics, authors, and even specific arguments across dozens of different manuscripts. A scholar researching Roman aqueducts could now find not only the primary historical accounts, but also the relevant engineering diagrams and contemporary legal texts about water rights, all linked through his meticulous catalogues. His care for the physical books was just as revolutionary. He designed humidity-controlled storage areas, using strategic ventilation and absorbent materials to protect delicate parchment from the rot and mold that had destroyed so much ancient wisdom. He specified the placement of windows and designed reflective light shelves to optimize natural illumination in reading rooms, extending the study day and reducing the eye strain that came from squinting at tiny script by flickering candlelight. The sudden and intense scholarly renaissance at these early European universities, where intellectual breakthroughs seemed to multiply overnight, was no coincidence. It was directly facilitated by this uncredited information management. How does organizing knowledge differently change what knowledge can accomplish? When ideas are no longer isolated treasures but part of a connected web, they begin to talk to one another. A medical text can inspire an architect, a legal principle can inform an economic theory. The Scriptorium Strategist built the invisible latticework upon which the Renaissance would eventually climb, proving that the architecture of information does not just store the past, it actively shapes the future of thought itself. From the silent libraries of the Scriptorium Strategist, we move to the looming, silent walls of a fortress. A castle that appears utterly conventional to a besieging army is in fact a masterwork of lethal deception, the signature of our 18th silent architect, the Rampart Revolutionary. This military engineer understood that the best defense was an active, intelligent one, a system that would guide an enemy to his own destruction. Scattered military treatises make veiled references to an unknown consultant, a man who transformed static stone walls into dynamic, reactive opponents. His most profound contribution was the widespread, systematic implementation of the concentric castle design, a concept of layered defense that created a fortress within a fortress. An attacker who breached the outer wall did not find the castle's heart, but instead found himself trapped in a narrow, exposed killing ground, surrounded by even higher inner walls from which defenders could rain down arrows, stones, and boiling pitch from every direction. This was not merely a wall, it was a trap that funneled invaders into pre-planned, inescapable positions of maximum vulnerability. His genius for murder holes was particularly insidious. He designed them not as simple openings in a ceiling, but as part of an integrated system, often concealed by wooden shutters that blended seamlessly with the floor until the moment they were flung open to unleash a vertical hell upon the soldiers crammed in the gatehouse below. He engineered counter-siege tunnels that ran beneath the foundations, allowing defenders to not only listen for enemy miners but to launch surprise attacks from below, or, in his most terrifying innovation, flood the enemy's own tunnels by diverting a nearby water source. Every defensive position he designed provided overlapping fields of fire, ensuring that no spot on the battlefield was safe from at least two different angles of attack, turning a straightforward assault into a crossfire nightmare. The legendary, almost mythical defensibility of Crusader castles like Cracked Death Chevaliers, which withstood countless determined sieges, finds its true origin in these uncredited defensive innovations. So why does the most effective defense often remain completely invisible until the very moment it is needed? The Rampart Revolutionary knew that a visible threat can be planned for and countered. But a hidden capability, a secret function woven into the very fabric of the fortress, creates a strategic advantage that is absolute. An enemy who does not know the rules of the maze he is entering is already lost, his numbers and courage rendered meaningless against a silent, intelligent design that waits patiently for him to make the first and last mistake. A bustling medieval marketplace could be a den of chaos, a place where a farmer's bushel of grain was never the same as a merchant's, and where a handshake deal could vanish with the morning mist. Our 19th silent architect, the market maker, saw this chaos not as an inevitability, but as a design flaw to be corrected. He was a commercial engineer whose true material was not coin, but trust itself, and he built systems to make that trust unbreakable. Merchant Guild charters from the period whisper of an anonymous reformer, a man who convinced city councils to adopt radical new standards that protected everyone, from the wealthiest trader to the poorest customer. His first and most fundamental innovation was the introduction of certified measurement standards. He designed public weighing scales housed in the town square, mechanisms sealed with the city's official mark, and fitted with tamper-proof locks to prevent dishonest merchants from adjusting the balance. He distributed standardized volume measures, metal vessels of exact capacity that were kept under guard, and used to verify the accuracy of every wooden bushel and barrel in the market. This created a common language of commerce, ensuring that a pound of wool in one town was genuinely a pound of wool in the next. His genius extended to quality verification. He established guild-led inspection systems where goods like cloth, wine, and spices were examined for purity and given a seal of approval, a guarantee that protected buyers from fraudulent or adulterated products. And when disputes inevitably arose, he designed the framework for commercial courts with standardized, transparent procedures, allowing for swift resolutions based on evidence rather than brute force or social standing. The dramatic economic boom in certain free imperial cities, which grew from small trading posts into wealthy, autonomous hubs of finance, was not just a matter of geography. It was a direct result of this uncredited commercial infrastructure that made them islands of reliability in a sea of uncertainty. So how do these invisible systems of trust enable such visible economic growth? The answer lies in the liberation of ambition. When a merchant knows his goods will be fairly measured and his contracts impartially enforced, he is willing to risk a longer journey, to invest in a larger shipment, to extend credit to a new partner. Commerce cannot flourish where every transaction is a gamble. It flows instead where confidence is architecturally embedded into the very cobblestones of the marketplace, encouraging risk, rewarding innovation, and quietly weaving the fragile threads of individual trade into the unshakable fabric of an empire's wealth. A city's layout does more than guide your feet, it guides your very thoughts. Our 20th silent architect, the psychological planner, was a master of this invisible craft, an environmental psychologist who used stone and space to mold human behavior itself. He understood that a wide plaza could make a crowd feel powerful, while a narrow alley could make an individual feel small and controlled. Urban planning documents from remarkably stable medieval city-states contain traces of an unknown consultant, a man who advised on everything from the ideal width of a market street to the precise height of a guildhall steps. His work was a form of silent social engineering. He designed intentionally narrow streets not just for shade, but to create natural defensive choke points where a handful of guards could control a rioting mob. He placed public fountains at key intersections, not merely for water, but to create inevitable gathering points where community bonds were strengthened through daily interaction. The facades of important buildings were not just decorative, they were deliberate psychological anchors. Town halls were built with broad, imposing staircases and heavy, symmetrical doors, communicating an unshakable authority and order that discouraged thoughts of rebellion. In contrast, residential areas were designed with winding, intimate lanes that fostered a sense of neighborhood and mutual surveillance, where residents naturally kept an eye on one another's homes. The remarkable social cohesion and low levels of civil unrest in places like certain Italian communes were not an accident of a peaceful population. They were the direct result of this undocumented application of environmental psychology. The entire city became a subtle machine for maintaining harmony. So how does the design of space silently shape the minds within it? The answer is that our environment writes a script for our behavior, a script we follow without ever realizing we have read it. A bench placed in a sunny spot invites conversation, while a dark, recessed doorway encourages isolation. The psychological planner proved that the most powerful laws are not written on parchment, but etched into the very streets we walk, turning the architecture of environment into the unspoken architecture of thought. A castle's great hall in the dead of winter should be a place of shivering misery, its stone walls leaching warmth from the very air. Yet in a handful of these fortresses, life continued in relative comfort, a quiet miracle engineered by our 21st silent architect, the thermal technician. This climate controller understood that the true enemy was not always the army at the gate, but the weather outside it, and he developed passive systems that turned the building itself into a natural regulator of temperature. Scattered building accounts mention an unknown consultant who would arrive to advise on the placement of a hearth or the angle of a window, leaving behind designs that seemed to harness the seasons. His primary tool was thermal mass. He specified the use of thick, dense stone for interior walls and floors, materials that would absorb the heat from the sun during the day and from great hall fires in the evening. Then, slowly and steadily throughout the cold night, these walls would radiate that stored warmth back into the rooms, creating a stable, gentle heat that prevented the bitter chill from ever taking hold. For the heat of summer, his genius flowed in the opposite direction. He engineered subterranean cooling channels, tunnels dug deep beneath the foundations where the Earth's temperature remained constant and cool. He designed clever ventilation shafts that created a natural convection current, drawing this cool air up into the living quarters while pushing the hot, stagnant air out through rooftop vents. His window placements were a precise science, calculated to capture the low, warming rays of the winter sun, while using deep-set embrasures and strategic overhangs to block the high, harsh glare of summer. The surprising habitability of certain northern European stone castles, where lords and servants alike could endure brutal winters without constant fear of frostbite, was a direct result of these undocumented climate systems. So how does this silent control of a microclimate become a strategic advantage? Comfort is more than a luxury. it is a foundation for clear thought and sustained morale. A council of war held in a warm hall makes better decisions than one conducted by shivering men. A garrison that sleeps through a cold night is alert and effective for the morning's watch. This architect's work proved that the environment within the walls could be as carefully managed as the defense of those walls, extending human capability not by fighting nature, but by quietly, intelligently inviting it inside. A circular courtroom seems a radical idea even today, yet one man designed it to dismantle the inherent intimidation of the law. This 22nd silent architect, the law layout specialist, understood that justice is not just about the verdict, but about the entire journey one takes to reach it. He was a legal process engineer, and his materials were space, procedure, and parchment. Fading judicial records from a handful of progressive principalities contain cryptic references to an anonymous reformer, a consultant who arrived not to argue cases, but to redesign the very stage upon which they were performed. His most visible innovation was the circular court design. He moved the judge's bench from a raised, distant dais and placed it on the same level as the other participants, arranging all parties in a circle. This simple architectural shift transformed the dynamic completely. It forced the judge to look directly at the plaintiff, the defendant, and the witnesses, making evasion difficult and encouraging genuine engagement from everyone present. The design enhanced acoustics, allowing even the softest voice to be heard clearly by all, ensuring that the testimony of a humble farmer carried the same weight as that of a wealthy landowner. But his genius extended far beyond the room's shape. He created standardized legal forms, clear and simple documents that guided an illiterate peasant through the process of filing a complaint or registering a property claim without needing to pay an expensive scribe for interpretation. He engineered document authentication systems, introducing wax seals with unique, complex patterns pressed into them, and requiring multiple clerical witnesses to sign every official parchment, creating a web of verification that made forgery nearly impossible. To combat the endless delays that plagued medieval courts, he introduced rigorous case management procedures. He created docketing systems that prioritized cases by age and severity, and he set strict, reasonable time limits for each step of the legal process, from the initial filing to the final judgment. The legendary reputation for fair and swift justice in certain Rhineland principalities, which attracted merchants and settlers from across the continent, was not built on unusually virtuous judges. It was built on this uncredited legal infrastructure that made virtue easier to practice. So how does the design of a justice system affect its perceived legitimacy? When the process feels opaque, distant, and stacked against the common person, the law is seen as a tool of the powerful. But when the system is transparent, participatory, and efficient, the outcome feels earned and the law earns respect. This architect proved that the experience of justice is itself a form of evidence. And by designing that experience with intelligence and empathy, he built something more valuable than any single ruling, a foundation of trust in the system itself. A simple clay pot can conceal a revolution within its curved walls. Our 23rd silent architect, known only as the Kilnkeeper, was the master of this hidden transformation, a ceramic engineer whose genius was fired into existence one piece of pottery at a time. Craft Guild records from bustling Mediterranean ports whisper of a wandering potter, a man who appeared at local workshops not to sell his wares but to share secrets. He taught artisans how to build kilns with precise temperature control, using a series of sealed chambers and carefully placed air vents to maintain a consistent, intense heat that ordinary wood-fired ovens could never achieve. This control was the key to everything. With it, he introduced reduction firing, a technique where he would limit the oxygen inside the kiln at a critical moment. This chemical manipulation forced the flames to pull oxygen from the clay and the glazes themselves, creating stunning, unpredictable colors, deep crimson reds from common iron oxide, and shimmering metallic lusters from copper that local artisans had only ever seen on priceless imports. His concern for safety was as advanced as his art. He developed vibrant, stable lead-free glaze formulas using crushed feldspar and ash, ensuring that the beautiful bowls and jugs gracing a family's table would not slowly poison them with every meal. But his impact reached far beyond the dining table. He engineered structural tiles with a unique honeycomb design, creating an air gap that provided superior insulation for roofs and floors, keeping buildings cool in the scorching summer and retaining precious warmth during the winter. The distinctive, brilliant architectural ceramics that define entire regions, from the vibrant tiles of Valencia to the durable roofscapes of the Adriatic coast, owe their existence and their legendary quality to his undocumented technical contributions. How do improvements in such humble materials elevate entire cultures? The answer is found in the quiet accumulation of daily life. A safer plate protects a child's health. A well-insulated home makes a community more resilient to the seasons. A beautiful tilework facade lifts the human spirit, turning a simple village into a place of pride and identity. The Kilnkeeper proved that culture is not just painted on the surface, it is baked into the very fabric of existence, a durable legacy fired in silence, whose beauty and utility outlast every kingdom that ever claimed credit for its creation. A community that shares a single, reliable heartbeat can achieve the impossible. This final silent architect, the Chronology Creator, was the horological engineer who gave society that very pulse, building the architecture of time itself. Fading municipal records from burgeoning trade cities speak of an unknown clockmaker, a figure who arrived to install the first public mechanical clocks, devices that did not merely tell time, but imposed a new kind of order upon the world. His foundational innovation was the weight-driven mechanism regulated by an escapement, a clever device that transformed the steady, falling pull of a heavy weight into a series of precise, measured ticks and tocks. This was the first true mechanical heart, a machine that beat with a consistency no water clock or burning candle could ever match. He complemented these new marvels with refined public sundials engraved with seasonal correction charts, allowing a town to verify its mechanical timekeeper against the sun's own passage. But his most profound revolution was the abolition of variable seasonal hours, the ancient system where an hour of daylight was longer in summer and shorter in winter. He replaced this fluid, farm-based rhythm with a new law, the standardized hour, one that was always 60 minutes long, day or night, summer or winter. Suddenly, a merchant in Genoa could agree to meet a ship captain from Venice at a specific hour, and both men knew exactly when that moment would arrive. The breathtaking economic coordination and social organization of emerging urban centers, where markets opened in unison, guilds began work at the same bell, and council meetings started on time, depended entirely on his uncredited timekeeping infrastructure. How does synchronizing time across a society enable entirely new forms of human cooperation? It builds a shared reality, a common stage upon which the complex dance of commerce, governance, and culture can be performed. A farmer bringing his goods to market no longer had to guess the hour. He could hear the public clock chime from miles away. A city guard change could be executed with flawless precision across a vast wall. This architect's work wove millions of individual lives into a single, coordinated tapestry, proving that the most invisible foundation of any advanced civilization is a silent, agreed-upon now, a shared moment that turns a crowd into a community and a collection of tasks into a synchronized symphony of progress. These 24 silent architects reveal a startling truth that the most profound changes in history often arrived without a signature. From the siege master who redefined defense to the monetary maverick who built trust into coinage, their contributions were woven directly into the foundation of civilization. Their work reshaped everything from the food on a peasant's plate to the laws that governed a kingdom, and the echoes of their ingenuity still resonate in our modern world, in the legal principles we follow, the infrastructure we rely on, and the very way we organize our society. Their collective legacy stands as a powerful challenge to the stories we tell ourselves about the past. It asks us to look beyond the famous kings and celebrated generals in the history books and to recognize the immense, often anonymous, power of dedicated expertise. So the next time you stand in awe of a medieval cathedral's soaring vaults, or cross a graceful stone bridge that has borne the weight of centuries, or even pause to consider the invisible systems of trust and time that underpin our daily lives, remember these unseen engineers. Their story is a quiet testament to a radical idea that true, enduring impact does not always demand public acclaim. Sometimes the most powerful architects are precisely those whose names the world never learned, the geniuses who understood that building a better world was a reward in itself, a legacy etched not in stone but in the silent, steady progress of humanity.